Imagine a random person comes from a faraway land and breaks into your home, and then on top of that makes you a servant in your own home to serve that person who is a thief, okay? You work in your own home for that person for decades until you decide enough is enough and you kick that person out of your home and reclaim your house, reclaim your property. Then that person is so mad at you and makes sure that you will never thrive. That person decides to retaliate and unite the most powerful people against you so that you can never thrive. Nobody is willing to trade with you anymore. You cannot even fix your own home because nobody is willing to sell you anything. For decades, you're struggling to get up and you are on your knees and you have to make a tough decision. You come to the conclusion that the only way for you to thrive again in this life is to make peace with the person that turned your life into hell, that stole your home from you. And even though you yourself have nothing, for the sake of peace, you decide to compensate that thief for the things that the thief has built in your home, right? With your labor and in your property that that person stole from you. And now imagine, even though you took back what is rightfully yours, your property, and even though you went out of your way and offered something to that thief that you practically don't have, right? That person says, no, that's not enough. I want more. This is what is happening in Zimbabwe right now. It's a shame, and not enough people talk about what is happening in Zimbabwe today. But first, let me give you some background info. Before Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, Zimbabwe was known as Rhodesia and was a colony by the British. And what happened in Rhodesia during colonial times was a textbook example of colonialism. Land theft on a massive scale. The indigenous community was dispossessed of their territories through violence, through genocide, through ethnic cleansing. And whenever there was armed resistance from the indigenous communities, the British colonizers fought back with an iron fist. And sometimes not alone. They received help from white South Africans who were at that time colonizing South Africa. And they basically killed a lot of people, okay? They wanted to keep Zimbabwe by all means necessary because it generated a lot of wealth for them. And during the decades of colonialism, these white settlers who stole the land from the people amassed immense wealth because Zimbabwe is incredibly rich in resources like diamonds or gold. And they have one of the best soils in Africa, which was perfect for farming. So the white settlers also made a lot of money from commercial farming. At a time, Zimbabwe was known as the breadbasket of Africa. That's how much they exported. Agricultural products like potatoes, like wheat, like maize, and what have you. And it's interesting, when I was in Zimbabwe last year, I was shocked when someone told me that these white settlers, the former colonizers, they amassed so much wealth, generational wealth, that their grandchildren have not even spent the money that their grandfathers have left behind for them. Anyway, fast forward, in 1980, Zimbabwe finally gained its independence. And in the early 2000s, Zimbabwe embarked on a land reform program aimed at redistributing the land from white minority farmers back to the people, to black Zimbabweans, rectifying colonial injustices. However, this move was met with severe international backlash. To punish that African nation for daring to take back what is rightfully theirs, the United States sanctioned the hell out of them, followed by the European Union and other Western nations. As a result of this economic isolation, Zimbabwe had no access to international financial institutions and loans that are important to develop a country. And this economic sabotage, designed and orchestrated by Western nations, combined with an incompetent and brutal Zimbabwean leadership that doesn't respect human rights, led to the downfall of the country. So the country was basically on its knees, okay? And I am 100% convinced that all that has been done, this economic sabotage, to warn other African nations to never dare take back their land from the settler colonialists that still live in that country. Namibia, for instance, another example. Can you imagine over 70% of the farmland is still in the hand of descendants of German colonial settlers? So we have similar scenarios in South Africa, where also over 70% of the farmland belongs to white South Africans. And we all know how they got that land, right? Up to this day, it was only Zimbabwe who dared to make this bold move and take back what is rightfully theirs. And as I said, I'm 100% convinced this was a warning for Namibia, for South Africans, and also Kenya, the country where I'm living in right now. Up to this day, descendants of British colonizers still own thousands of hectares of land that was taken through the violent dispossession of the indigenous communities. Now, facing a crippled economy, Zimbabwe agreed in 2020 to compensate the former white farmers with 3.5 billion US dollars. Fam, let that sink in. The Zimbabwean government claims that they are compensating the white farmers not for the land that was taken back, because the land belongs to the government, but for the infrastructure that the settler colonialists have built on these expropriated lands. And this decision was part of the efforts by the Zimbabwean government to normalize the relations with the West, to revise the bad reputation that Zimbabwe gained as a result of this decision to forcefully take back what's rightfully theirs. And of course, the Zimbabwean government also hopes that the West will finally lift the sanctions, even as the nation grappled with the fallout from these very sanctions. I don't know about you, fam, but it's so heartbreaking to witness what is happening right now. Even after the US has imposed tariffs on Zimbabwe, what was Zimbabwe's response? They removed all taxes so that the US can import goods tax-free, while other African nations respond on the newly imposed tariffs with tariffs for the US. Look at what Zimbabwe is doing. It's so painful to watch a nation like Zimbabwe, rich in minerals, with such a fertile soil, with such humble and strong people who sacrificed so much for their freedom. How is it possible that the US has so much power over this nation? And sadly, this is nothing new. In fact, it reminds me on a very similar shameful act that France has committed. Whenever a black nation decides to reclaim their land and their dignity, they are not met with support, but with sanctions, isolation, and economic sabotage. That is exactly what France also did to Haiti. For those who don't know or who don't remember, in 1804, Haiti became the first black republic born from a successful slave revolt. And the Haitian Revolution was, by the way, the only successful slave revolt in modern history. And then 21 years later, in 1825, France demands 150 million francs from Haiti as compensation for the slave owners, because during the slave revolt, the plantations were burned to the ground, rightfully so. However, they demanded that the French slaveholders and plantation owners must be compensated. And France threatened Haiti with re-enslavement and recolonization and a naval blockade if they refused to pay that compensation. Haiti agreed and had to take out high interest loans from French banks just to pay this debt. It took over 100 years to repay. So basically, Haiti's economy was strangled from birth. As you can clearly see, what is happening in Zimbabwe right now is not an isolated case. They are patterns. And it teaches us that freedom is never free when you're black. Imagine centuries of slavery, decades of colonial exploitation didn't come with reparations. Instead, black people are expected to pay, expected to apologize. All of this while the colonizers got rich from our resources, got rich of the blood and sweat of our ancestors, and then had the audacity to demand payment when we broke free. They basically left us with debt. Can you imagine? Debt, not dignity, loans, not land, and poverty and no power. Fam, if this outrages you as it outrages me, please share this. Speak about this. Teach your family and friends. And as always, please let me know what you think in the comments. I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say at this point, and I'm slowly but surely getting hopeless. How can we get justice? How can we reclaim what is rightfully ours without facing this kind of punishment and economic sabotage. I look forward to see you in the next video.